Hello, everyone, and welcome to my YouTube channel. I would like to thank Surabhi Singh today for joining me, and we're going to have a short but informative discussion about feminism, advocacy, just being leaders out there in the world. How do we use social media and YouTube and all these things just to get our message across? And how can we fight for gender equality? How can we empower both men and women, trans, and all communities to be protected and feel secure? So we're going to talk about those things today here. So I want to start out with asking Surabhi first, how are you, and what are your initial thoughts when you hear the word intersectionality and gender equality? What are the two things that come to mind when you hear those things?
I definitely think when it comes to intersectionality as a immigrant descendant, meaning that like my parents immigrated here and I was born here, I think it was like the most difficult thing that many first generation Americans that, have traditions from other countries is like kind of trying to adapt and see how you could form kind of your own identity with both cultures. And just to like go on off from that, when it comes to sexuality or like I guess gender roles, I want to put it at like that's more in regarding to kind of like what would my quote unquote gender role be here compared to what it would be in India, which is where my family's from. So I definitely have noticed that like I being a girl, an Indian woman, I should know how to cook or I should be one, at home to clean and like things like that. And I think like that assumption is always assumed by whether it be other parents or whether it be like, guys in the past that I was dating that were Indian and things like that. I think that assumption was always made, which is not the case. I only can cook with measuring cups. I can't, actually cook a freehand. So I think things like that, like those type of comments, I have definitely dealt with my whole life. And I think that's where like feminism comes along is like, oh, like if I know how to cook, like you should know how to cook too. Like, why does it have to have a gender? Like, even cleaning, why do I need to be? It's assumed that women always have to clean or like should be clean. Why can't men or like, be asked to clean as well? So I think that's where it all goes together.
See, I definitely differ from those men in my views. I personally think if a man has the right or privilege of a good education and a good job, I strongly believe that women should have that same opportunity and right. That's what I,
Yeah, yeah, that's how it should be. Yeah.
so I I differ greatly from those thoughts, which is why I have you here talking to me about it. Um, so the next thing I wanted to ask you is how do you how do we as a community fight for more gender justice and inclusivity of the trans community? Because I know a lot of people who identify as transgender, um, not all of them are, there are certain things that they're not allowed to do, such as being in the military, but I think things are changing, as well as in the athletic sphere. It's like restricted, but it's changing. How can we continuously fight to get them the rights they deserve and the opportunity they deserve?
Well, in my eyes, I am a big ally of the LGBTQIA community to start off with. Obviously, cannot speak for them, but I definitely believe that their voices should be amplified. One phrase that a few people that I know from that community do say is that trans women are women. So stop treating them as trans, or like stop putting that in front of them and just identify them as women because that's what they are.
Um, so how on your social media, how do you advocate for women? I've seen a lot of informative posts on your social media and stuff like that. So how do you come up with the content? Because I think it is definitely very informative in my eyes, and that's why I decided to have you as a guest. But how do you find these articles and things like that are very powerful?
I definitely strongly think it's important to check your sources to start off with. Like Wikipedia is not the place to find content. It's definitely websites. I can't even think like some like from the top of my head, but like Rain is a good source, the CDC, things like that. Anything that has a reputable sources themselves is very important to use. So whenever I talk about women's rights, I definitely look at like the experiences I go as a woman, and that too as a person of color. Obviously I don't go through as much as a different, somebody who's a different ethnicity. I feel like someone always has it worse than me. That's how I like to see things as. And I think it's very important that like I feel like there were times where not by my family, but like my extended family or my family friends or like friends even that would say things like, oh, like women should be quiet or women should, just women have to suffer more in a marriage. Like, why is that the case? Like, I never understood that why, like, that's the case. So I think it's just, like I said earlier, is like kind of just amplifying our voices and not making jokes like, what's on a blank piece of paper, women's rights, like things like that. Like, that some of us may have been guilty of making, but it's more importantly to just have the change mindset or like learn from your mistakes.
So as you said, that's very valid. Like, it's very important that all rights are talked about. So I guess, has the pandemic changed any of your thinking about how women of color do or do not fit into the feminist movement? And where did you first learn about feminism? Those are the first two questions I have.
Those are really good questions. Okay, so I definitely think like the pandemic, because it really, really emphasized how important social media is or like online, anything online. I think like it gave a lot of us a more safer way to express ourselves, I think, or like a more like easier way because some things are easier said over text or over a caption on Instagram than it is in person. Like I feel like to be honest, like in person, I'm more on the shy side. So like I feel like I would have difficulty openly expressing myself as compared to when I'm like recording a video on my story or like, writing a caption about, how I truly feel. And I'm like a writer and a visual learner, a mix of the both. So for me, graphics and like words or like long captions are how I successfully express myself and compared to like just saying it out loud. I definitely also want to add on to the fact that like I personally don't think there's a feminist movement, but being a feminist is different to every individual. Like, like I should not be told what I can and cannot wear in school. But if somebody themselves feels more comfortable being modest, she has every right to wear modest clothing. If I want to wear non-modest clothing or more like show my skin more, I should have a right to do that. Like I shouldn't be told what I can and cannot wear. That's my thing. I think, and overall, just with this feminist movement, I think it's just we want to be in line with men. Like we want to be treated equal. It's not we want to cancel men. Like even though those jokes do come and stuff, I think it's not intended to, oh, let's just be better than men. I feel like some men don't even realize that they're feminists until they understand the real definition of it. Like they'll think it means that women are above men, but that's not the case.
It just means treating women with the same respect and same kind of, I guess, giving them equal opportunity, equal
Yes. Yeah.
representation. I definitely am a big supporter of that. So
Yeah.
that's kind of why I think personally, my personal life, I've never rushed to be in a like serious dating relationship because because I think differently, I want to find someone who I can relate to, like who takes me as more of a person. So that's kind of why I'm talking about this, because not a lot of guys come out and talk about feminism. So I was very grateful when you said that we could do like an informative video and discussion on it, because
Yeah.
it's you don't get that many opportunities. So let's see here. What else did I want to bring up? So, what is your take on reproductive rights and reproductive health? I strongly believe it should be a choice, but what are your thoughts on reproductive health products? Do you agree with the side where it should be something that insurance companies help cover if women choose to go that route? Or do you think that they should, like, what is your, I know it's a very debated issue, but what are some of your thoughts on that? I'm sure you could
Oh,
shed
it's
some light.
100% it should be covered because women were born to give birth, we're born to carry offspring. We didn't ask for it specifically, it was given to us, and I think, like, definitely the insurance can cover it. I think it's stupid that we still have to pay for a lot of, like, we have to pay for condoms, we have to pay for birth control, we have to pay for all these things when we really shouldn't have to, and I feel like things like that should be pro-choice. Um, I also feel that, like, I think it should be, like, more, um I think it's just also, like, the conversation isn't as normalized, which is, I think, really important that it should be. And also pro-choice is not pro-abortion, and I think that's something that a lot of people don't understand. You may not necessarily want to have an abortion, want to, you know, not have whatever, you want to have kids, some people don't. Um, that does not mean that it's everyone you want every single person to have an abortion. It just means it gives people the choice of whether they want to consider adoption, abortion, or keep the child, and that option should be there.
So now let me get back to, I guess, representation of women and women's rights. So one thing I wanted to ask you is, now that we do have our first women vice president, do you think that we're starting to have a shift in the system of patriarchy and male dominance? Do you think that there's starting to be some change in the positive direction, or do you still think there are ways to go? But as a woman, do you still feel proud and glad that finally a woman is in the seat of the vice president in such a high office? Do you still feel proud? And do you think that this also leads to more women being empowered to pursue their dreams and career goals and not just be forced to cook and clean and do household chores all the time?
I think it's a start, but it's not enough. Um,
That's fair.
this time it was really big because she's the tiebreaker for the Senate, which is a very big deal considering it's a 50-50. So I feel like that was a really big switch to happen. And considering she's a Democrat, she will most likely side with the Democrats. Um, I think that we can do better. I'm hoping her being president definitely gave a lot of, I guess, women, particularly women of color, Black women, even more specifically, now can see someone or relate to someone that looks like them. I don't think, I don't want to get too much into politics.
I don't
I
either.
just,
So
yeah, but like, I think like overall, it definitely the fact that a woman was elected vice president is a big step, but we're definitely behind other nations that have had female presidents for years, or they've been electing female presidents back to back. So I think it's just a slow change, but maybe in another 100 years we'll be equally treated. You never know.
definitely. So I guess let's talk a little bit more about intersectionality now that we've talked about it in the introduction a little bit, but can you maybe get into a little bit to it a little bit more about at least what you know through your studies and through all of your advocacy work? Can you kind of define for our audience really what that necessarily means and what exactly, I guess, how could we make clear that feminism is not like a bad thing, it's a good thing, and like you said before, it's not females being more dominant than men, it's just having equal rights. So how could we talk about that and intersectionality a little bit more?
So like intersectionality, I think is just like a person shouldn't be looking at me like, oh, she's a girl, she can't do it. Um, I think I am a woman, but it's not my entire identity. It's a part of my identity, which I'm very proud to be. Um, but I shouldn't be looked down upon for the sole reason that I'm a woman. If my skills, like for example, in the work industry, like marketing, okay, I'm lucky marketing is more women than men based on the current. It's very equally lined up. But in a lot of industries, like the IT industry where I currently work in as marketing, it's very like cutthroat. White males are taking the lead. It's still been like that for the last like 50 or so years. And I think like I've seen like my like director has told me like full on that like they don't treat you equals. They treat you like you don't know anything or they talk down on you because she's a woman, but she may have had equal amount of experience, if not even more experience than the men that were on her team. And I think because of the sole reason that she was a woman, she was talked down upon. And I feel like when it comes to intersectionality, it's very important to understand that we have multiple identities. Like, I'm a woman. Okay, I do marketing. Okay, I speak out on certain issues. Okay, but I'm also an older sister. I'm an immigrant descendant. Like, there's so much parts of our identities, but people like to focus on the sole fact that we're a woman and that's it. And that's where the issues come along. So I think it's just like getting to know a person aside from their gender or their cisgender or whatever they, started off as. Like, that's just my thing.
So as a South Asian Indian woman yourself, what is a message that you would like to say to other young immigrant or even young Indian women born here, other people your age? What is some words of wisdom you could give them? How could they continue to pursue the career they want to pursue the education they want to pursue? Like how how do you keep them motivated? What is your advice to them to stay motivated and stay focused on their end goal of being more than just a woman?
Block the noise, block the auntie advice that people give you because it's not their place to give you. And do what you think is best for you. You're gonna fail, you're gonna mess up. I messed up. I had to switch my major 4 years in, so I messed up. That and it happens, but I'm definitely at a much better path now than I was at 18 years old over here trying to be thinking I could be a doctor when I realized it wasn't for me and like I wasn't embracing my creative side, which is where I get marketing from. And I think it's like you don't necessarily be need to be, and I respect the essential workers, I respect the healthcare, don't get me wrong. It's just not for me. You can still help others in different ways. You can still speak out in different ways, and it doesn't necessarily need to be healthcare, social justice, any of that. You can literally, I do marketing, and then on the side, I spend some time. I sponsor a girl in India, so I pay, some of my paycheck goes to her. And then I do things like I create graphics explaining things about certain issues. So you can help anyway. Like someone in IT can give access to the internet to a village and not even know. You know what I mean? Like it's so many different ways that you can help communities, and it doesn't necessarily need to be doctor, engineer, or like the basic things that all the South Asian communities want us to be. So I think it's just exploring our options and like understanding that you should put yourself first, but you can always help others in your using your skills that you already have.
Um, so what was your driving force? Because I know college is hard. So how did you stay motivated through college? Because I know it could be a draining part of life, because for me it was pretty draining. I tried to look positive and be happy all the time, but
Yeah.
I know college can potentially be a draining environment, especially when you're an Indian American and you have all these pressures from, like, not your parents per se, but maybe other aunties or society. So how do you keep yourself motivated through that intense time of your life? I think that's important for our audience to know.
So I definitely think that what kept me motivated is like once I knew what I wanted to do. And definitely keeping the whole positive mindset where I'm privileged to be here. Um, I believe that everything happens for a reason and it should not be in a positive way. Like, okay, I didn't get this job. Maybe there's another job out there for me. Or wasn't successful in biology. I'll be successful as a psych major and go into marketing instead, which is exactly what I did. I think it's just having a positive mindset and also putting yourself around positive people. It's okay to have friends that critique you. My two closest friends from school critique me on a daily basis, but I know their intentions are good. They're not going to gaslight me and tell me, oh, you're doing this wrong, but you should do this because it'll benefit them. They say things for me. I think that's very important. Also, like, I think it's just like being around positive people and trying to make the best of every experience and normalize taking a day off. I think this whole hustle thing, especially that came during COVID, which is great. People are creating new businesses, they're forming their own thing. Great. But take a day off, relax, things like that.
Yeah, the workplace coming home did definitely made the workplace life and personal life separation go away. So I think that's also an issue right now.
Yeah.
And I guess I wanted to touch on a little bit on the wage gap and your thoughts on the wage gap, and where do you see the future of that wage gap? Do you think that we will have leaders that kind of are able to reduce that wage gap? Because I know New Jersey's starting to increase their wages to, I think, 15 an hour, but like I just know that federally it should increase, and I think there's still ways to go, because I'm specifically feeling that it's like, even for me, like I feel stressed about trying to find the right job that will still give me all the happiness without feeling like work. So I guess what is your advice on like the wage gap? And I guess when you are looking for jobs, because I'm sure you also went through that process, how can both men and women kind of find jobs that pay decent wages but also don't aren't draining or aren't something they're not happy doing? And then
I
I guess
think
touch
when
on
it comes
the wage gap and how it's not equal for men and women.
Yeah, I definitely think the wage gap conversation needs to constantly be said. It's disgusting, to be honest with you, that women are getting paid less. I also feel that it's not just women, but a white woman compared to a South Asian woman, compared to a Hispanic woman, compared to a Black woman. Those wage gaps are a whole nother story.
I think that's
And I
there in general, right? And
Yeah,
there's a
and I
lot
think
of
it's already
inequality in the workplace, if depending on your race or your ethnicity. That's not right.
yeah, and I also think like if it's already an issue within women, it should be fixed in that way first and then go on to men. It is going to be a long process. I honestly don't know the perfect solution. Like, I feel like it sucks because when they do those equal opportunity things and then they ask for your gender, your thing, like there should be a blind way to not consider that. Um, so yeah, that's just my take on the situation. I can't speak too much about it because I need to research more, but yeah.
All right, and last, or maybe I guess let's talk a little bit about disability. I, as a male, have a disability. That's something that sometimes I'm nervous about disclosing, but I'm sure it's even harder for a woman, and in general, how do we empower people who are disabled, especially since today we're talking about women and feminism? I guess you could talk about that first because obviously that's the main topic. But in general, how could we, like you said, how do we stop these blinders? Like how do we make sure that yes, an application could say we're equal opportunity employer, but as soon as someone puts, oh, I'm disabled or I'm this, they get kind of put on the side.
I think honestly, and it's crazy because I've seen some LinkedIn posts where they're like, they'll fill it out and then they'll do the job again and then just not disclose anything. And when they don't disclose anything, they get the job opportunity, they get the chance to interview, they get more opportunities. So it's definitely a problem. And I think to start off is kind of like being inclusive. Um, just like we all have intersectionality, you're disabled, your disability is not your identity. And I feel like another thing is like it should be normalized because nobody's perfect. We all may have something that we don't know. And I think it's just overall with disabilities, it's definitely something that conversation needs to happen. And like when being inclusive, okay, for example, like I'm taking an exam, somebody in my class is blind. How is he gonna take the exam compared to me? They would provide them a computer, they would provide them an audio. Um, Somebody with only one hand, how are they gonna type? They would have to have a one-handed keyboard, you know? Things like this. So I think it's
And
just
I only have
making.
a learning disability, and I'm sure people have other things too. So like, but like when it asks you on a job application, it says if you have anything to disclose it. But just because you're gonna disclose it, like you just said, sometimes it makes you not even get looked at for the next round. And that should change.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure.
Um, so is there anything else that I guess you could share? I don't have questions really, but like I guess what are some other thoughts you could provide us today? Like, what are some more insights? Because I know you've been spending a lot of time with this kind of stuff, and yeah, I guess what are some other thoughts you have?
I think it's important that the fight's not over. Um, Equality is really important, and sadly, there will always be some issue that we would be fighting for. If you don't know enough, that's okay. You just amplify the people that do know, and do what you can on your end. Like if you like, for example, like I didn't know when, movements were happening this year. We had the Black Lives Matter movement. We had women coming out about sexual assault. Those are not movements. They're ongoing issues that people still deal with. I think like it's just very important to amplify their voices, be empathetic. I think the number one thing is to be empathetic and be a good listener. And with those two things, that's the only way this community or the world will be a better place because without those two things, there's nothing.
I agree with you. It's definitely important that we empower, we we kind of empower people and not look at movements as a one-time thing. It's a continued battle, continued fight. So I definitely agree there. And I guess, like you said, it's not over. We got to continue advocating and being strong. So thanks for sharing your thoughts with me. And I guess, like, I guess the last thing I wanted to ask, and this is for all the men out there, what are things that men could do to kind of change their views? Because I never had the view that a woman is only as good as a housewife. I never had those thoughts that they shouldn't get a career. But for the men that still may think like the olden days, how do we get them to change and be like change makers? That's
I
my
definitely,
question.
yeah. So I think that the main thing is like kind of like telling a man needs to see, okay, right now women are being asked to be a housewife. How would you feel? if you were a woman. Like, it's very important to put yourself in their shoes. The best way you can. You obviously can't relate to it, but you need to try to be empathetic and understand why they don't wanna work. Why don't they wanna stay home, or etcetera. I think it's very, very important, to just, like I said, be a listener, be empathetic, put yourself in her shoes and say, "Hey, if someone said this to me, would I like that?" Treat others the way you wanna be treated, that kind of mentality.
And is that also your advice for men that in a relationship tend to want to be more dominant? The same thing? They
Yeah,
should be
same
better
thing.
listeners?
Yeah, like, if you're going on a date, split 50-50. I mean, unless you wanna treat them for, like, a birthday or something, that's fine. Like, that should be a conversation to have, um, and things like that. Yeah.
So big thing is being empathetic and being more equal when you're together,
Mhm.
right? Okay. Sounds like we've covered a lot, right? You think?
Yeah.
And this conversation could take hours and hours. We don't want to take hours of your time, but we just wanted to spend a few minutes to discuss the issue. And I also am grateful for Surabhi for giving me this opportunity to have someone to discuss this with and also just do something that I'm not used to because of COVID. Wanted to create some informative content. So thank you for giving me the opportunity and being so welcoming and so open to this idea of collaborating because I just think it's a great time right now to just inform people and be creative and bring out your
Yeah.
creative side. So thank
Yeah,
you
no
for
problem.
all your help.
No problem.